income of the government. So in this manner, government is going to take the debt whenever its revenue is not going to be enough. So here, why the governments are going to take the debt? That is public debt. Especially the first concept is that to cover the budget deficits. What are budget deficits means? In the budget preparation, government is going to prepare the anticipated revenues and expenditures of the government. Whenever the government's income or revenue is not sufficient, then it is going to go for the debt for the anticipated expenditures. So to recover such deficit or the balance amount, the government will go for the concept of the public debt also. In this manner, whenever there is a difference in the current expenditure, current income, government will go for the concept of the public debt. And the next one is that recently you know that after the formation of concept of welfare states, the government expenditures are expanding. That is one of the basic cause for the concept of public debt. You know that as expenditures are increasing, but governments never be able to increase their revenue, there will be few limits are there. High taxation is also not advisable. So governments are going to take its activity governments are going to take the activity of the public debt. And you know that economy stability also, government has to incur few expenditures. That is, whenever inflation is there, it is to act accordingly. It is to reduce the purchasing power, to reduce the demand. And like that, whenever depression is there, lack of production is there, government has to take care. It has to increase the purchasing power or the demand among the people. So that only government has to taken care of the existing expenditure. So it needed the public debt also. And government has to taken care many development plans for the benefit of the people, for the creation of the infrastructure, so that it is to incur major expenditures. So whenever for such expenditures, government's income is not able to sufficient, then it is go for the public debt also. And to finance war. But nowadays, war is a rare activity, rare incident. We can exclude from the reasons also. To finance public enterprises, it is one of the important concept. Public enterprises are nothing but the public undertakings. To finance them, government has to incur many expenditure. For that, if the existing revenue is not enough, it has to go for the debt also. And like that, for the optimum allocation of the resources also, government has to incur the expenditure. This is one of the important as well as the hard one. Allocation of resources basically depends upon the economic system productivity methods. For example, perfect competition is there is no problem. Monopoly or monopolistic competition is there, that leads to the misallocation of resources because of the profit motive and other legal barriers in that particular productive system. So in such cases, the government has to take care of all these issues. It is to create the benefit to the people, means it is to impose the controls or encourage the other public firms to enter into that particular production industry. For all these things, create the resource maximum allocation among the people or among the production activity, so that the government has to incur the expenditure also. And to create the employment, especially full employment, also one of the basic reason. Not only that, for unforeseen expenditures like that of the floods may be there, natural calamities will be there, famines will be there. To get through all these issues, government has to get the expenditure, get the money from other sources. That is nothing but calling as the public debt also. So in this manner, we are able to understand that why the governments are going to take the debt for a particular activity. So after that, public expenditure, public debt is one of the form of the debt from different sources. It is going to be either from the markets or in the form of the loans or at the rate of the interest offered on the government bonds. It is going to be taken. So based on this aspect, public debt has been classified into different categories. That is nothing but the internal debt as well as the external debt. Internal debt is nothing but the debt raised from the internal sources, that is within the country, from banks, from RBI, from non-banking financial corporations. Those are located within the country. Whereas external public debt is related to the concept that from outside of the country, that is from institutions like International Monetary Fund, Asian Development Bank, like that, other market sources. So this is the first classification. But economists always encourage the internal source of debt only, not the external source, because it is having more escalation effective factors. And the Next debt is the productive debt and unproductive debt. So depends upon the system for which it is taking, that decides the concept of the productive and unproductive debt. If it is going to take the debt for the productive purpose, it is the productive debt. For example, railways, irrigation schemes, power schemes, transport and communication enhancement. These are going to increase the productivity in future. So these are nothing but considered as the productive expenditure. Unproductive loans are nothing but they are going to be spent on the unproductive purpose. For example, floods and droughts expenditure in times of epidemics to giving the relief to the people, whatever the expenditure incurred by the government, all these comes under the concept of the unproductive debt. As there is no income, government has to repay them from their own sources of tax revenue. And the next one is nothing but the redeemable, irredeemable debt. So redeemable debt is nothing but the principal amount is going to be repaid by the government accordingly predetermined period of time till the government is going to pay the interest. So by the time interest is going to be exhausted, total repayment of the loan is also going to be completed. That is nothing but the basic aspect of the redeemable debt. For example, now it has taken after 2024 June, it is going to pay. Till 2024, it will pay the interest. On that particular June 9, it is going to pay the loan also. Irredeemable public debt is that where the loans for which no predetermined date will not be there. Repayment of the principal date by the government may not be there. Just it is going to continuously pay the interest on it permanently until the repayment of the principal amount for a long duration. This is the basic difference. Irredeemable as well as the redeemable debt also. Funded debt and unfunded debt. Funded debt is nothing but the long-term debt. It is going to be redeemable after a year or not redeemable at all. So, for example, securities are there which are marketable in the stock exchange, comes under the concept of the funded debts. And the government only pays the fixed sum of interest to the creditor, and whether it may be repaid, that depends upon the option of the government also. And the next one is nothing but the unfunded debt. Unfunded debt is nothing but the short duration one, like that of government treasury bonds, which may be have a maturity period of 3 to 6 months, or never they may be for the longer period also. So they are to be repayable within a particular period of 1 year. So these are the basic kinds of the debt classification. Government is going to take the debt. It is going to incur for the expenditure for which was shortened for it also. So these are the basic classification of the public debt also. Internal from inside the country, external from outside the country. Productive on production activities, unproductive on unproduction activities. Redeemable at a particular time, government is going to pay. Irredeemable, government is not going to prescribe the date at which it is going to repay. And funded, unfunded. Funded is nothing but the redeemable. Unfunded is nothing but the short duration period amount. So this is the basic classification. So through this, we are able to understand government is also should have a compulsory obligation of expenditure. For that, whenever the incomes are not sufficient, it go for the debt. That is nothing but calling as the public debt also. So in our public debt concept, today we discussed about the meaning of public debt and classification of different public debt. So in our tomorrow's class, we try to understand about the sources of public debt, repayment of public debt, and effects of public debt. These 3-4 important topics along with fiscal policy, federal finance like that issues we will discuss in our tomorrow's class. Okay, I try to gather the important questions also.